Have you ever sat in your favorite chair, perhaps with the television murmuring in the background, and found yourself wondering when exactly everything began to feel so quiet? Not the kind of peaceful quiet that soothes your soul, but the kind that echoes, the kind that comes after too many days without a call, without a visit, without someone truly asking, "How are you doing today?" and waiting to hear the answer. Maybe once, the house used to buzz with life, with laughter, messes, stories told around the dinner table. And now, you're left watching seasons change from the same window, holding a cup of tea that has long since gone cold. You smile when they finally call. Of course, you always do. You say, "I'm fine," even when you aren't quite sure you are. And sometimes, after you hang up, there's a hollow ache in your chest. Not anger, not resentment, just a quiet wondering, did I become invisible when I got older? That question isn't one we say out loud often, but many carry it quietly, like a small stone in the pocket, not heavy enough to break you, but enough to remind you, with every step, that something has shifted. Being left behind doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always abandonment. Sometimes, it's just being gradually forgotten, less included, less heard, less seen. But what if this chapter of your life, this chapter that feels so empty, could be something else entirely? What if it didn't have to be about loss, but about returning to yourself? Frank once said, "I spent my whole life showing up for people who don't even know how to sit with me now. I built a life around being there for others. And now I sit here wondering if they ever really saw me." He's not bitter, just tired. Tired of being the one who remembers every birthday, who calls just to check in, who sends cards, who asks the questions no one returns. But something changed in Frank when he stopped waiting for the phone to ring. He started walking again early in the morning, when the air was cool and the streets were still. He'd nod at the mailman, wave to the woman who walked her dog near the park, and slowly, that hollow space inside began to feel just a little less sharp. Because the first quiet choice that leads to peace is this: stop waiting for someone else to make you feel remembered. You can remember yourself. You can greet your own heart every morning. You can cook for yourself the way you used to for others. You can light a candle in the evening and play music. Not because someone's coming over, but because you deserve beauty in your space. It's a shift, a gentle rebellion against the belief that your worth is tied to someone else's attention. Margaret had been left behind in more ways than one. Her husband passed 6 years ago. Her children live in other cities, their lives full, their visits sparse. She spent months hoping someone would notice her loneliness. She dropped hints. She made subtle requests. She waited. And then one day, standing in front of her bathroom mirror, brushing her thinning hair, she whispered to her reflection, "I'm still here." It was such a small sentence, but it changed everything. Because the second quiet choice is this: speak to yourself like someone who matters. Don't let the silence outside turn into silence inside. Talk to yourself kindly. Encourage yourself. Celebrate yourself. It may feel silly at first, but over time, it becomes sacred. And something else begins to happen when you make that choice. You stop shrinking. You stop apologizing for needing love. Time. You stop making excuses for those who don't show up. Not because you've hardened, but because you've softened to yourself. That's where peace begins. Not in their return, but in your return to the parts of you that have long waited to be acknowledged. And the third quiet choice, perhaps the most powerful of all, is learning to stop chasing old roles. You were the caretaker, the fixer, the organizer, the rock. But who are you now, when no one needs you in the same way? Grace told me once. I had to grieve the version of me that only existed through others. And when I did, I met a woman I hadn't seen in years. A woman who loves poetry, who paints badly but joyfully, who sings along to old records and laughs at her own jokes. She stopped being the person everyone expected and started being the person she'd forgotten she was. And in doing so, she stopped feeling left behind. Because the truth is, peace is not something they bring to you when they finally remember. It's something you create, slowly, in the spaces they forgot. You are still here, and there is still time to reconnect with the soft things, to protect your joy, to no longer apologize for existing fully, even if no one is watching. Sometimes, The hardest part isn't that people forget to call. It's that you keep pretending it doesn't matter. You tell yourself they're busy, that this is just how life is now. That silence is normal, expected, even dignified. But inside, your heart still whispers, "Does no one miss me the way I miss them?" And so you carry it, with grace, with a small smile, with practiced sentences that sound light, so no one will suspect the weight beneath them. Helen used to do that. She'd say things like, "I like the quiet, honestly, or I wouldn't want to be a bother." But the truth came out one afternoon in a way she didn't expect. Her neighbor, Chloe, a young woman with 2 kids and a career that kept her rushing, stopped by to drop off some soup, a small gesture, a kind smile. But as Chloe turned to go, she paused and said, "You know, I don't say this enough, but I really admire you. You always seem so calm, like nothing rattles you." Helen meant to say thank you, but what came out instead, in a voice thinner than she meant, was, "Sometimes I wish someone would rattle me, just knock on the door and sit for a while." That sentence changed something for her, because it was the first time she told the truth, not about her strength, but about her longing. Which brings us to the 4th quiet choice. Tell the truth about your heart. Even if no one's asking, you can write it in a journal, speak it in prayer, say it aloud to your own reflection. Because pretending not to care doesn't protect you. It isolates you. There's nothing weak about wanting connection. There's nothing shameful about feeling left behind. You're allowed to grieve the distance between you and the people you love, even if it's not caused by cruelty, just life's shifting winds. Ethan learned that grief isn't only for death. It's for relationships that no longer feel reciprocal, for phone calls that used to come weekly but now arrive only on holidays, for hugs that feel shorter, for conversations that no longer ask, "What's new with you?" He used to blame himself. "Maybe I said too much. Maybe I was too needy. Maybe I expected too much." But one day, after another missed birthday from his son, he sat down and made the 5th quiet choice. Stop blaming yourself for other people's absence. He stopped explaining it away. He stopped twisting his own worth to fit their neglect. And something softened in him when he did. Because peace doesn't come from fixing them. It comes from freeing yourself. You may not be able to make them call more often, but you can stop internalizing their silence as a reflection of your value. You may not be able to make them come visit, but you can stop measuring your joy by their presence. That's when Ethan began inviting his own company into the room. He started reading novels again, not just newspaper articles or health pamphlets, but fiction, the kind that sweeps you into someone else's world. He even joined a small online book club, mostly strangers, but they listened to him. They laughed at his jokes. They asked about his thoughts. It felt strange at first, sharing space with people who didn't owe him anything, and yet treated him with kindness. That's the 6th quiet choice. Build new spaces that nourish you, even if they start small. You're never too old to begin again, to make a new friend, to join a new circle, to say, "I'm still curious, I still matter. I still want to share and be shared with." Ryan, who's 72 now, once told me, "The most painful day of my life was realizing I'd made myself emotionally available to people who weren't emotionally safe. I gave them the softest parts of me, and they didn't know how to hold them. And yet, instead of closing himself off, he decided to do something brave. He stopped giving to people who only took, and started offering his time and stories to those who met him with presence. At the local library, he began reading stories aloud to children once a week. Their eyes lit up when he spoke. Their laughter filled the quiet places in him. It didn't replace what he lost, but it reminded him that he still had something to give and people willing to receive it with open arms. And maybe that's what peace really is. Not silence, not withdrawal, but choosing every day to place your love where it's valued, not begged for, not demanded, not sacrificed endlessly, but valued. And so you rise, slowly, maybe gently, but with a heart that no longer waits for others to fill it. You become your own anchor, your own invitation to joy. You still hope, of course. You still love. You still answer the phone when they call, but you're no longer curled up beside it, waiting, because now you're living again. There's a quiet dignity in letting go, not the kind of letting go that feels like giving up, but the kind that feels like coming home to yourself, Frank told me once. I stopped hoping they'd knock on my door and started walking through it myself. It wasn't a grand change. No dramatic scenes or confrontations. Just a shift in the way he sat, the way he spoke to himself, the way he no longer waited for others to validate his day. It began one evening, while watching the sunset from his porch. The sky was doing its usual dance, soft orange fading into deeper purples, and for the first time in a long while, he whispered aloud, "This is enough!" That evening, that breeze, that breath, he didn't need anyone else there to make it matter. That's when something truly begins to shift, when you stop chasing presence from others and start embodying it in yourself. Because here's the truth. No one tells you when you grow old. The most magnetic thing you can become is someone who is no longer looking to be chosen. You've already been chosen by life, by time, by every sunrise you still get to witness. Sophie, who raised 3 children on her own, used to believe that if she didn't keep giving, they'd forget her. She kept their schedules memorized, sent care packages, gave money when she didn't have much to spare, but still, the silence grew louder. One day, after another forgotten holiday, she didn't cry. She didn't call. She simply went to her garden and spent the whole afternoon planting herbs and humming. She said later, "I gave the day to myself, and it was the best gift I've gotten in years." There's power in that, in reclaiming days that were once circled for others, in choosing not to center your joy around people who don't check in. And strangely, beautifully, something else starts to happen when you do. They notice, not always right away, and not always in the way you'd hope, but energy shifts when you shift, when you stop overgiving, when you stop being endlessly available, when you stop cushioning every silence with a warm, "It's okay." You begin to glow differently, not with defiance, not with bitterness, but with a calm rootedness that says, "I am still here, and I am no longer waiting to be remembered." I remember myself now, Ryan told me. I didn't mean to teach them anything. I just started living, and that's when they noticed I wasn't chasing anymore. His daughter called one afternoon, not because he reminded her, but because something in her heart stirred. I realized, she told him, I hadn't asked how you were doing in months. That small shift mattered more to him than 1,000 "I'm sorries," because it came from presence, not obligation. And that brings us to the 7th quiet choice, perhaps. The one that wraps them all together. Be at peace even if the apology never comes, even if the visit never happens, even if they never fully understand the ways their absence shaped you. Not because you're pretending it doesn't matter, but because you've learned how to hold your own heart again. You've become your own witness. You no longer need them to name your pain in order to honor it. You've done that yourself with honesty, with tears, with grace. And what flows from that healing is something gentler than joy, something deeper than pride. It's a stillness, a steadiness, a lightness that lets you breathe easier, Grace said. I used to cry every time they left without saying goodbye. Now I wave not from the doorway of desperation, but from the porch of peace. I know who I am now, and I know that love doesn't live in their presence. It lives in how I treat myself. And so she fills her days with beauty, not to fill the absence, but to honor the presence of her own soul, her own life, her own becoming. Because growing old is not just about what fades, it's about what comes alive in the quiet. The freedom to choose your rhythm, the permission to rest, the discovery of new friendships, new pleasures, new parts of yourself that were buried under decades of doing for others. You begin to live not from obligation, but from intention. You eat when you're hungry, not just when it's expected. You walk where the trees are, not just the sidewalks you used to rush through. You wear the colors that make you feel alive, even if no one else sees them. And in doing so, you begin to belong to yourself again. No longer someone's afterthought, no longer a background character in other people's stories, but the main presence in your own. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You only need to stand firmly in your light. If you've stayed with me through this conversation, I want to pause right here and say thank you, truly. Not just for watching, but for being here, for giving your time, your attention, and most importantly, your heart. This conversation wasn't just about aging, it was about remembering yourself, reclaiming the softness and strength that may have been overlooked by others, maybe even by you. And if any part of this message touched something quiet inside you, something that's been waiting to be seen or heard, I just want you to know, you're not alone. You are not the only one who feels the shift. You are not the only one who misses the sound of someone checking in. You are not the only one who's learning, day by day, how to live from your own center again. There's something extraordinary that happens when you stop chasing your place in other people's lives and start creating your place within your own. And maybe it's not easy. Maybe the days still get long. Maybe your phone still stays quiet more often than you'd like. But even in the silence, you are growing something beautiful. Maybe today, you allowed yourself to rest without guilt. Maybe you said no, even if your voice trembled. Maybe you made your favorite meal just for you and set the table like a guest was coming because you were coming home to yourself. These moments matter. They are not small. They are not signs of giving up. They are signs of waking up to your own peace, your own presence, your own permission to be whole again. So if you've been feeling left behind by children who are busy, by friends who've grown distant, by a world that seems to rush past you, I want to gently remind you of this. You are not forgotten, not here, not now, not by the life still moving through you. You are worthy of peace, worthy of respect, worthy of love that does not require overgiving or over-explaining. You've done enough. You've been enough. You are enough. And as we close this video, I'd love to hear from you truly. If any part of this message felt familiar, if your story echoes any of what we've talked about, would you share it in the comments? Even just a few words? There's something powerful about being witnessed, about saying, "This is where I am, this is what I've felt," and realizing someone else nods and says, "Me too." I read every comment, and there are others reading two kind souls who may be sitting in their homes right now, just like you, wondering if anyone else understands. And if this message brought you a little comfort today, or reminded you of your worth, I'd be honored if you'd stay connected by subscribing. Not because numbers matter, but because you matter. And I want this space to be one where you can always return and find something gentle waiting for you. So, thank you again for your time, for your presence, for the quiet courage it takes to keep showing up for your own life, even when others forget to. May the rest of your day and your days to come be filled with moments that honor you, moments that ask nothing of you but your being, moments that remind you, you are not behind, you are right on time. For your own peace, you're not alone here, and I hope you come back again soon. With all my heart, thank you.